Feeding our civilization is one of the great logistical challenges of human history. It involves creating reliable sources of food that are resilient to rapidly changing planetary conditions, mass-producing crops while minimizing the space and the resources they take up, and then moving that food across vast distances before it rots. And as climate change, population growth, droughts, and diseases threaten our fragile food supply, some people and companies seek to reimagine agriculture through the lens of a new frontier of human innovation, the low Earth orbit economy. Space agriculture is the practice of creating highly efficient technology that can mass produce food in low Earth orbit, and then using only gravity, that food can be easily dropped to any location on the planet. This technology isn't just a pipe dream. Scientists have already begun growing crops in space, using radiation from our sun to create genetically altered crops that can survive in the most desolate landscapes on Earth. The vision of SpaceAg is straight from a science fiction novel, and yet some visionaries like today's guest, Christopher Udall, are making it a reality. Christopher combines business savvy, venture capitalism, science, innovative technology, and an all-encompassing mission to revolutionize modern agriculture. And then looking into the deep future, let us explore the role of space technology, like space agriculture, as our species begins to live in places other than our home planet. My name is Robert Roach, and this is the Type 1 Planet podcast. Please listen, share, check out our clips on our social media online at Type 1 Planet. Visit our website, type1planet.net. And reach out to us. If you're enjoying this, if you want to help the team, if you have ideas, if you have potential guests, we want to hear from you. Hello and welcome to the Type 1 Planet podcast. I'm Robert Roach. I'm joined today by our guest, Chris Udall. He's a venture capitalist in AgTech and space agriculture. He's an accomplished entrepreneur, a TEDx speaker. He's also the managing director for the Hudson Alpha AgTech Accelerator program, which we're going to learn all about today. Goes into the different phrases I've just used, biotechnology as well. So Chris, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on, Robert. It's a pleasure to be here.
So the mission of Type 1 Planet, we're trying to reimagine and hopefully spark a redesign of our civilization so we can enter into a long-term sustainable state in equilibrium with ourselves and with our planetary environment. And a big part of this is envisioning how our agricultural industry needs to evolve in a future that is fraught with uncertainty. So we have climate change, population growth, unequal distribution of resources. The list just goes on and on seemingly. So these are topics that you work with and talk about on a daily basis. So from the perspective of your work, what are the biggest challenges that humanity faces right now in agriculture in the future?
Oh, I always think the biggest one is land. I mean, we're not making any more of it, and we're constantly selling it off for new housing developments. I think everyone's familiar with the housing shortage. And all that means is there's going to be less agricultural land. With a growing population, that means less food. So you have to do one of two things. You either have to increase the productivity and the yield size of your current production, or you have to find alternative solutions to grow in other places. So you have countries like Dubai that are working on greening the desert, which is phenomenal. And then you have groups like myself that are firm believers that you can grow crops and produce in low Earth orbit and send them back down for terrestrial consumption and create that low Earth orbit ecosystem. So as a venture capitalist, that's the main thing I look for, is solving that problem of how the global food crisis really is the problem we're trying to solve, right? And how do we grow more efficiently? How do we grow better crops that are more sustainable, that use less land, that use less water, so we can sustain a much larger population here on the planet? So it's fun. I got to make money as a venture capitalist. So finding the sweet spot in companies that are making money today that can return an investment to my shareholders and to my limited partners, but also are right on the doorstep of entering these futuristic types of economy.
Now, all right, I guess we got to go straight into SpaceAg here because it's so interesting. You know, efficiency is a key word I think that you just used there. Having an efficient system of agriculture, efficiently using land.
Uh, what is the argument for saying that space ag is in any way an efficient way to create crops?
So it's an unlimited amount of space, right? So vertical farming is one of the most talked about solutions in solving for the loss of agricultural land. And vertical farming is great, but you can also do vertical farming in low Earth orbit. So you can do different things with crops in space that are very costly to replicate here on Earth, right? Exposing them to different spatial radiations, different stressors. Great example is the cotton that's predominantly used in China is based off of a seed that was genetically modified in space, exposed to much harsher climates and radiation. It then became resilient to drought and was able to grow in some of the arid regions of China. And it makes up a huge proportion of their cotton growth. So that's the more research side of what can happen. But if you're familiar with O'Neill colonies, that's something Jeff Bezos is trying to establish with his orbital reef program, is creating actual office parks, fully sustainable and scalable office parks that you can run manufacturing that generally can be pollutive here on Earth in space because you reduce that strain on the climate. So you can do the same in ag. And it gets a lot more exciting when you start talking about deep space exploration and trying to colonize the moon and beyond. So
Okay, let's bring it back to that one of those things you mentioned, changing molecular structures, and it sounds like the genetic structures of
mhm.
seeds and plants in space. So that's something that the Chinese have already employed. Do you know how long ago they did that? How are they doing
Yeah,
this?
if I'm not mistaken, that was around the 90s. They've been ahead of us in the ag sector of space research, and we're fixing to catch up and overtake them in that regard.
That's fascinating. So tell me, I mean, you also used a phrase, a low Earth orbit economy. So is this a like a is this a how do I put this? Is this a capitalistic phrase? Is this a government phrase? I mean, I feel like you have to work in tandem with a government in order to make something like that a reality.
Yeah, so that's the exciting part is the aerospace industry is going towards the private sector, right? You have companies like SpaceX, Relativity Space, Sierra Space, Blue Origin, uh, that are basically doing what traditionally only NASA would do in the past, right? And they're willing to take a lot more risk than NASA. I mean, Elon's famous for just blowing up rockets and cutting his rocket nozzles with basically shears and a grinder before he sends up a rocket, right? And with reusable rockets, the affordability to go to space is reducing. So companies like Nanoracks, they'll launch a payload up to the ISS for like 100 grand, which is not all that cost prohibitive, depending on what you're doing. So the applications in pharmaceuticals and ag, I mean, it's what E. coli germinates at like 6x in space versus on Earth. So the way you can find rapid uh, new pharmaceutical applications or virus prevention type things, it's all accelerated in space. Manufacturing in zero gravity is a whole nother thing when you don't have that smushing effect. You could potentially, there are companies working on 3D printing full human organs in space. So it's the economy is huge in space, and we're right on the cusp of it. I like to think of it the same way as the .com boom, right? The internet's there. People are starting to realize it, look at it, go towards it, see the benefits, and it's about to have that boom in what we can do up there.
So as a capitalist, you're looking at a very large amount of zero gravity space and saying this is as it gets easier to get there, there's all these different applications that are extremely profitable but also extremely beneficial to our species.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of resources in space. Um, when you look at asteroid mining or other planetary mining, you know what we have here on Earth that's finite is very plentiful once you get up there and once you figure out how to do this stuff, right? We're not at the point where we can go start doing that today, but one of the problems that, in my opinion, is the most important, and it's the one that no one's really thinking about because it's not sexy, right, is agriculture, right? It's really cool to think about mining in space and the equipment that would be used for that, but it's not quite as sexy to think, how do we build a combine that works in space to harvest space crops, right? And traditionally, entrepreneurs, especially today, right, the ones that come from farms, they go to school, they don't go back to the farm. They go work for some Bitcoin or crypto or SaaS model company. And so we're seeing that agriculture is kind of being left behind. And Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock Global, just a few weeks ago said the future of venture capital is in hard science and hard tech. And then he specifically cited farming as the future of venture capital, mainly because we don't need a fast delivery eating service, right? But we need to have the food to be able to use that, and that's in the ag side. That's one step deeper when we're paying attention to really what we consume, right?
Okay, I don't. And if you can't give a more detailed technical explanation, that's totally fine. But for the layman listener who's just trying to imagine what crops in space actually looks like, how does that concept? What kind of crops? If is it being done? How does it? Are they inside of the ship? Are they inside? What does it look like?
Yeah, that's great. So the ISS has grown a pepper, and it was a huge morale boost just to have a pepper on the International Space Station, right? So that's an experiment that's been done. The company that I work with, that I've invested in, that's doing this is called Shipshape Urban Farms, right? They basically built a bioreactor that can grow greens, leafy greens, at a factor of 3 times, so 3x the growth rate on a normal crop, and they can have 5 acres and 500 square feet, right? They can do that, so they're actively creating more land, right, to get rid of food deserts, and they're on track to be a unicorn company, which means they'll reach $1 billion valuation before 6 years, right, of operation. They're really crushing. I couldn't be happier with them. But the exciting part is they're going to space, right? So we're neighbors with NASA. NASA's headquartered where we operate here in Huntsville, Alabama, and they've found a way to work with NASA, pending the partnership agreements that we're currently in process with, to provide that type of bioreactor in space, right? And not just grow things in space, but grow things in space and turn the stalks into biopolymers, which then creates tools, and they can use essentially wastewater to do it. So you're turning waste into food and tools, which is huge for some of the problems that we're finding.
Did you say turning these stalks?
So the non-usable part of the plant, right?
Okay, so you've got the leafy greens, and then you've got the stalks, and you can make those into reusable polymers or something like that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And those can go in 3D printers and that type of thing, make whatever you want. So you don't have to launch up materials, which is very expensive. You can create them in space. So that's part of enabling that in-space ecosystem and economy, right? Imagine a 7-Eleven in space, right? And what that would be to dock, buy food, drop your waste off, have that turned into someone else's food, and be able to gain materials for tools or tools themselves, right? It's quite a fascinating concept.
Well, now you're talking about space society. I mean, these are people, if you're trading and buying and creating and wasting food up in space, then there's people up there a lot, all the time.
Well, I mean, that's NASA's vision, right? They're going to the moon, and they're going to the moon to stay. So this is no longer in the realm of science fiction. We're building a base on the moon. What does that mean, right? Someone has to be able to provide services, and And the other exciting thing is making sure that everyone's voices are heard, right, in this, right? I work with one company that is building a space station for the First Nation populations that have a conglomerate. They want to make sure they have a say in how the resources are used that are being mined in space, and that they're not owned by one country. So it's really fascinating stuff, and I can nerd out about the space economy all day long. But
Yeah.
you asked me what it looks like. What it looks like is a hydroponic system, right, that adapts to the inside of any container. So you can take essentially the second stage of a rocket, which is referred to as space junk. It's just floating around. It's a big tube.
A giant cylinder. Yeah.
Yep. You can close that off. You can fill it with this modular technology that Shipshape Urban Farm has, and you can turn it into a farm. And then you can then bring that over, tether it to whatever space station you might be in, and then you have your food source. And so it's kind of that reuse, recycle mentality. And then in the future iterations, the tech is just continuing to improve on
s
in space. So it's very exciting.
Does this actually have is it actually feasible to, because I understand actually for the low Earth orbit economy and population, the future population that will be living out there, I see this as being a completely useful and incredibly conceivable concept. But in terms of growing plants out in space and then bringing them back down to Earth, that's where I could see skepticism coming in. And how is that a feasible investment, to create plants in space and bring them back?
Yeah, I mean, we grow predominantly a lot of our crops in California, right? To ship them to New York, we're losing almost half due to spoilage, right? So the feasibility of putting food on a truck and shipping it thousands of miles, if someone told someone that in the early 1900s, right, they'd be like, you're ridiculous. Like, that is the stupidest way to have a food system I've ever heard, right? You have to have food produced locally. And now we've gotten to these mega farms, and we can do those shipping routes, but we're losing a ton of food. We can't do that anymore, right? The 10, 15 years, 40 years down the road, the population will be too high to allow that type of waste. Well, when you grow in space, the shipping back down to Earth is only a few miles, right? And it's a much shorter supply chain. It requires no fuel. Gravity does all the work, and then you just deploy reusable parachutes. And then you use the similar technologies that we see in drones, like these drone fireworks shows, right? You just float it down to either a hub in a city that will then deliver it throughout the city, or potentially direct to your doorstep, depending on what the regulations on that are going to be in the future.
Gravity, that is something, you're so right, because you putting stuff up there is a little more difficult than bringing it down, isn't it? That's fascinating.
Exactly. Well, and you have, Sierra Space has the Dream Chaser plane that can, and Huntsville is one of the airports they can land at. And so they can take anything from any one of these space stations, land at the Huntsville airport, and they can be in my biotech lab in 13 minutes versus landing in the ocean, having a ship pick it up. You're basically a day late. Who knows what happened to your experiment during that time, or your crop. So everything is changing, which is very, very exciting.
Are there any plans yet to, or maybe a timeline to grow crops and bring them home and actually do that entire process once?
So I can't tell you a whole lot about it, but I can tell you that this one company in my portfolio, right, Shipshape Urban Farms, in 3 years will be growing in space and selling agricultural products from space into our market. I can't tell you which one. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but it's very, very cool. And when they announce it and when you see it, you're gonna be like, that's awesome.
Wow. I think we got to talk to Shipshape on here. Maybe get my co-founder, who's a geneticist. She's going to want to understand some of the science behind it. That's fantastic. Is it possible we can talk to him? Maybe.
Oh,
So yeah.
absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. I'll hit you up for that. That's interesting. So let's talk a little bit more about what's happening here on Earth. We've got AgTech. Recent stuff that's happened. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, changes in the global supply chains. Are all of these events encouraging the development of new domestic ag tech? What's happening in your world because of these events?
Yeah, absolutely. In every single way, right? From not being able to have phosphorus, so we have historically low yields that are predicted for this year. So we're expecting to see a lot of food related conflict in developing nations, right? In the US, we might not see food conflict, but we're going to see higher prices and we're going to see a lot of items that are no longer for sale on the shelves, right? Out of stock type of things. We won't export a lot of our crops, is what will happen. And what that means for what I see, I mean, this last go around, right? We had 580 entrepreneurs trying to get into my program, right? And we accept 5, we invest $100,000 in each of them. They move here for 3 months and we accelerate their growth, right? 20% month over month, and try and spin them up into these highly scalable and very impactful organizations. Impact is always kind of the first thing we look at. How does this change the landscape of agriculture? And what we're seeing is now that we're starting another recruiting cycle, the hype is just that much more visible, right? Getting cold emails, getting random LinkedIn messages and different things. I love it. People are getting excited about agriculture because people are getting aware of the problem, and they're also, wanting to help. Some of it's a really unique group of entrepreneurs, right? I have yet to find someone who's not a joy to work with in the ag space. They tend to be very down to earth, very human centric, right? Motivated. They're not just in it to make a ton of money. They're in it to solve a really, really pressing problem. So you are seeing those innovations. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing them at the scale I would like to. There's not enough entrepreneurs that are aware of the economic gains in agriculture. So they don't think about it. They tend to move to San Francisco to start their business, and then they get scooped up by Uber or one of these other large companies, and that talent goes over there to work on a different problem. But bringing awareness to both the economic opportunity in ag tech and biotech, and also connecting it with that talent. One thing that's unique, I don't know if you know a lot about Huntsville, Alabama, but it has one of the highest amount of engineers per capita in the world. It's the headquarters.
What kind of engineers? I guess it makes sense with NASA right there. Yeah.
Space. Yeah. Aerospace engineers. Yeah. So, Warner von Braun, NASA's headquarters is here. Huntsville's the town that put people on the moon, right? We built the equipment for that, right? Houston's just for when there's a problem. It's always a joke and a dig at Houston. But one thing I tell the entrepreneurs that are looking, they're like, Alabama. Like, I don't want to, Alabama and entrepreneurship. Like, what the heck? But one thing I tell them is, look, you can go to California and you can start a business. And you can go to New York and you can start a business. And the sky's the limit, right? Tons of venture capitalists over there. But in Huntsville, we build rockets, right? The sky's the baseline. This is a secret that's hopefully not going to be a secret for long, but a secret deep tech hub of our nation, right? And getting people to focus on problems that are pressing, like food scarcity and agriculture. And, I think everyone during COVID saw how important the supply chain is, right? And that's the next thing we need to look at, right? Is how important our agricultural infrastructure is, because it's okay, but it's not sustainable for where we're headed.
So I want to ask you about how you would evaluate investment potential for these companies that come in, but I'm going to ask it in a in a different way, because this is not evaluating the investment potential of someone who's creating, the next competitor for Snapchat or something. This is someone who's hoping to create a technology that, or an organizational kind of business plan that is addressing a major issue that we face as a species. So when you look at these companies, are you thinking investment potential in terms of the amount of money that they can make now for you, or are you thinking the future? We're running out of phosphorus, we're running out of whatever these problems may be, that you're seeing potential issues that we're going to face and saying like, all right, that's an investment potential because they're actually going to help us get through that problem.
I love this question. So a little background: Hudson Alpha is a 501c3 nonprofit that has a venture capital arm. Right, they sequence the second most genomes, right, in the U.S. They're a huge genomic research center. Basically, pulled the whole genomics department of Stanford and moved them to Alabama, and have built that from there. So their motivation is very much in the hard science and changing, right, how the world sees both genomic agriculture and agricultural technology. So I'm not necessarily, the first question I ask isn't how much money are they going to make me or return to my fund. It really is that more nonprofit motivation, right? My background is in the nonprofit space. And at night, I'm the CEO of a nonprofit called Rebuild for Peace. And I love working.
An amazing company, by the way. Go check it out. Go check out Rebuild for Peace. We're not going into it today, but it's awesome.
But yeah, my background is a cultural anthropologist, right? So I set two rules early on in my investment thesis. One was, I'm not going to invest in jerks. And the second was, I'm not going to take money from jerks, or I'm not going to let jerks allow me to manage their money because I don't want to work with them. Business is a community. It's a community of people. You can hire any number of people to manage numbers, but managing a community is a whole different business, right? And so what we've seen is creating a portfolio of companies that are collaborative, that work together, rather than compete against each other is really fruitful, right? And we saw that in our first program. The 5 companies we selected, it was like they were all best friends from the very beginning. I mean, sharing contact leads, sharing sales pipelines. It was insane. It was like the opposite of business school, right? It was really something. So that's one thing that we look for, is founder confidence, right? Is the founder someone, even if the idea changes completely on its head, is the founder someone who's going to drive something to market? That might not be what they're pitching me today, but if I tell them their idea is stupid and they go on with something else, are they going to drive it to market? So that's, and we create manufactured conflict in our interview process to kind of test that level of coachability. But so that's a big part of the investment. Obviously, there's a fiduciary responsibility to provide a return, but the investment we make is not a predatory one. We're not asking for a ton of equity in exchange for our investment. We basically, it's called an uncapped convertible note, which means whatever your terms are today, we're just going to give you money in those terms as long as they're validated by the market, right? And if you're not raising, whatever your terms are tomorrow is what we're going to invest in, which is insanely generous. Because again, the core focus of what we're building and what we're doing here is not to be predatory towards entrepreneurs, but to actually build them up and make sure that they can get their world-changing initiatives at the scale they need to be in order to really make a dent in society, right? So it's very philanthropic.
Yeah. So the accelerator program, just for those who are not familiar, can you explain how an accelerator works? Why did you, and then also why you chose this model, or why this model is a successful way to launch these businesses?
Yeah, so the accelerator model that we use, basically we scout out for the best companies we can find all over the world, right? We offer to invest $100,000 in cash into their current round, right? If they're raising, or into a future round. But the real value is we move them to Huntsville, Alabama. They live in my office for 3 months. And every single day, we just try and introduce them to different mentors, to different investors. Every day is a new problem. And every day we try and find someone who's an expert in solving that particular problem. And we get them connected and we get them talking, right? And so the amount of growth that you see in 3 months is similar to what a business without an accelerator would see in like 3 years, right? It's a lot of work. It's very, very quick. But by the end of it, the little investment piece that we do is so small in comparison to the follow-on funding that they get, which, if I'm not mistaken, is like $40 of follow-on funding for every dollar we invest. And we're already seeing that with some of our companies. And we just ended in December with our first cohort of 5. They finished their 3-month program. It was a little quicker this time, being the inaugural program. But we're already seeing that follow-on funding of investors saying, look, these people they've been vetted, which is a big deal for these companies. And the Hudson Alpha Accelerator vets them like no one else, because we have a team of scientists, of some of the most prestigious biotech and AgTech scientists that sit on our panel. And we bring, the top 20 companies and say, here's what they are. And they poke holes in their technology. They get them on the phone. The amount of vetting that we do to confirm the science is accurate, right, is really shocking. And then it goes to an investment committee, right, and then we make our decisions. So it's a really fun process. It's a very difficult process to pass, but that's the whole thing. Is we don't want to invest in flash in the pan companies like they do in Palo Alto, right? If you're good at pitching and you create a lot of hype, you get a lot of money. We're not about that. We're really just, does your science make sense? We're a middle market. We invest in middle markets. So you can't spend $4 to make $1 with us like you can in California or New York, right? You have to have unit economics on your side, and the math needs to check out. So
are all of these organizations coming out of the accelerator for profit?
Yes.
Okay. And
yes, some of them are working on B Corp certification, and the accelerator or the company that powers Hudson Alpha's AgTech accelerator is called Generator. They're one of the top 10 accelerator firms globally, one of the biggest of its kind, and they are also a certified B Corp. So they have a very different approach about both investing in middle markets and investing in underrepresented entrepreneurs. And those underrepresented populations. So it's really kind of turning the model on where value can be created, which is exciting.
I think one of the big reasons I wanted to talk to you, Chris, is because of you are a philanthropist in your background. You've run a nonprofit. You've trekked all over the world, helping people down to entering their houses and teaching them new things. And yet now you're a venture capitalist and you're working in a system that we see a lot of opinions on right now. This is the capitalistic system, democratic capitalism. And why is capitalism an important model to use instead of, for example, the nonprofit system when we're trying to get these technologies out there? Why should a company need to be profitable if the idea could help humanity?
That's a great question. I love the nonprofit system, but they got it wrong. Selling an item or a service that provides value to a customer and using that for a good cause, in my opinion, is the correct way to make positive change. Asking for donations and grants and different things just creates a dependence and then a codependence, and it just gets murky really quickly, which is why people are weary of nonprofit corruption, right? But man, do we trust Domino's in our society? I mean, we'll let them know exactly where our cell phone is while we're walking. I mean, you can get a pizza delivered to you while you're riding your bicycle in some rural area, but the police don't have that same access, right? We trust for-profit companies. The marketing is great. So we're like, cool, let's do it. And so that similar type of structure, because that's what we've decided we're going to put our trust and our faith in for changing the world, is something we really need to pay attention to, right? Is democratic capitalism the best model in the world, right? That's a different debate. But right now it's efficient, or can be efficient, to create really positive change. And it's what we have today, right? So learning about how to, I attended the University of Notre Dame for my MBA school, and their whole slogan is "Business is a force for good," right? And that's a lot of business schools, I think, have that same slogan. But it's important, right, to look at business not as returns to a shareholder, even though it's important, that's the motivating factor, but how do we change the world by providing the carrot, and say, look, you can make money while making peace. I mean, that was the title of my TED Talk, The Profitability of Peace. But,
Yeah.
but it gets exciting when you look at the incentives of, some people aren't motivated to change the world or to do good. That's just a fact. And, as much as I wish everybody was, I understand that they're not. But how can I get you in the door to make positive change by telling you something that you care about, right? Which can be a financial return or whatever. Again, part of our investment thesis is we don't take money from jerks. So when we raise our big venture capital fund, we're the people that have put in large checks and large sums of money are really, really good people. They have that similar vision of, hey, let's use this money, let's change the world. There's going to be a financial return. It might not be the financial return that you're going to get off of investing in, any of these huge SaaS companies, but the social return is going to be huge, right? We're changing the face of agriculture, or trying to, right? And that's what gets me up in the morning, makes me excited to go to work. So it's venture capital, it's capitalism at its finest, but it's a different motivation for why we do what we do, and how we make money.
You're kind of turning that slogan from business school on its head. Business is a force for good, but it's like forces for good can be profitable businesses. You just have to figure out the right way to do it. Let's, you are clearly passionate about this. You're clearly excited about what's going on. I'm very excited to be following all of your updates and all the companies that are coming out of this this unique accelerator. When you sit down, end of the day, I don't know if you would pour a scotch or something like that, and you think about the future, what is kind of like the pie in the sky long-term vision for AgTech, SpaceAg, low orbit economy? What could this look like in 100 years? How could it change the way that we live as a species?
Well, according to ChatGPT, the agricultural low Earth orbit economy is a $40 billion industry in 2024. Right.
Jeez.
You gotta love AI. So what does the future look like? Lucrative. Lucrative is the answer, right? But what changes is when you know that people aren't going to bed hungry globally, right? What other problems can you solve, right? We're always in a constant state of transition right now with artificial intelligence like ChatGPT coming online, right? It's going to employ a lot of minds, right? That's inevitable. But what happens when our basic needs are taken care of by things like space farming or robotic farming or any number of these things? It's really exciting because it's so unknown. Who knows what will my role be in society? And that gets exciting. I mean, I'm hoping that at that point in time, I'm sitting down just grateful to have seen all this, to have been a part of it. At the end of my workday, that's usually how I feel, is just very, very grateful that I've found some really great CEOs that are making some amazing things, that I can pull a paycheck doing something that I'm so excited about and that I enjoy doing and working with these entrepreneurs every day. And usually I sit at home and I pour my seltzer water, right? Just big fan of seltzer water.
Cheers.
And I get on Call of Duty, right? With a group of executives in the aerospace industry. There's a little club that we have, and
Nice.
we still do business. We're decompressing, right? We're going on little missions together, and then we're doing business in the loading screen and talking about the future and what that looks like. And it honestly is too much fun. I mean, I I always say Huntsville is basically Washington D.C. in shorts, right? Because
Nice.
it's,
All right.
the government spends $9 billion in this town, so there's a lot of affluence and there's a lot of prosperity. But people are really down to earth. They're relaxed and they want to do more. They want to do something exciting. And they're all a little bit nerdy because aerospace, you can imagine. So anyway, these gaming groups are a fun way to do business that I never expected to get into.
Love that.
But that's what my nights look like. It's if I had to pinpoint it, it's having a lot of fun with a lot of very highly influential individuals, and just being grateful to be a part of the ride.
Well, we're pretty excited to be a part of the ride right now. Just learning about this. This is exciting. For the listeners and watchers of this episode, what are some of the companies to watch? Where should they be going to follow the updates in this space? What are some of your favorite news sites or any kind of like resources that where we can like continue to learn more and continue to get the updates as they come in?
Yeah, I could tell you the companies that I've vetted and I've put my name behind and invested in are My Food Robot out of Spain, MicroMGX, which really cool group what they're doing. AgTech Logic, they're flipping spraying technology on its head. Fractal, doing biopolymers and shipshape urban farms that we've discussed. Those companies, I've seen them grow 20% month over month. They are really on fire right now. And if you're in a position and you're looking to diversify your portfolio or your investments into the ag space, you couldn't go wrong looking at those guys. I'm also happy to talk about any opportunities on investing in a venture capital fund. There are opportunities in my fund for such investments for accredited investors. I think the best news source you can go to, just talk to people. I love, I get my news from LinkedIn generally, which I don't know if that's the best, but I think I learned the most just going out and sitting in a coffee shop with someone I've never met and just learning from what they have to say. And usually they know a little bit of news from somewhere else that I've never heard of. And
or just
I
doing
don't
this.
know, it's more fun. Exactly. Just talking to people. You learn so much talking to people. So that's my favorite news source.
Well, if you're going to invest your money, first of all, to go back to the investment portfolio, if you're going to invest your money, invest in the future of our species, please. And listen, I know Bitcoin looks so rad after the FTX crash. No, I'm just kidding. Just bail that. Come over. Let's talk to Chris and Hudson Alpha and check out these amazing companies. Last question, Chris. If I could sit you down at a round table, virtual or in person, with a group of individuals or organizations, who would you most want to talk to? Not only about this, but about, if you could give your 2 cents on from your perspective on what we need to do as a species to become more robust and resilient and sustainable, who would those people be? And it doesn't have to be names, maybe just titles or types of people.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would love to have a meeting with the Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates. He would be in the room, just because they're diversifying out of the oil industry, and ag is a huge focus, and SpaceAg is also one of their focuses. And I would love to work alongside that mission. I think I would just be honored to be in a room with a conglomerate of tribal leaders representing our First Nation populations throughout the US and Canada. and Mexico, mainly because there's a lot of wealth there, and the motivations to use that wealth are usually very good, and along these same lines of sustainability. And then probably Mr. T, because I'm a big fan of the A-Team, and I just want to have him in the room. And when I say something stupid, I want him to be like, "I pity you."
The ultimate hype man slash tear you down man. I'm with you on that one. That's awesome.
Exactly. I mean, is it
I may have a
bad that
connection. Oh, go ahead.
I think it's bad, but my dream car is his van. I mean, I just want to drive that to work every day.
I'm actually with you on that one as well. And I may have a connection for you for the First Nation leaders. I'll get in touch with you about that. But could potentially be a conversation we could facilitate. Chris, I can't thank you enough for jumping on here. This is so interesting. We're probably going to have you on again, maybe in a couple of months with new announcements and new updates from a certain shipshape organization. We want to hear all about it. Maybe we can have you on with them. But thank you, genuinely. This is really exciting stuff.
It'd be a pleasure. And thank you. It's been a blast.
Cheers.